Hi everyone, it's Sarah Black Spiker here, coming to you from our backyard with a part 2 to today's live stream when we're talking about reimagining new possibilities. There's a second part to this exercise that I invite you to really be with, and it has to do with a topic that's a little bit less popular, and that is boundaries. Boundaries are sometimes a conversation that can be very uncomfortable with my clients, and it was a conversation that I found really uncomfortable when I was discussing with my own coaches and mentors around creating my own. But the thing is that boundaries, right? They are just like you, just like the work that you're doing, just like the vision that you're bringing to life. They are multi-dimensional. They are multi-layered. So the first thing I'd like to offer to you is to really, when you are answering the 4 questions that I asked, that I offered to you in the first video, which are, what do you really want and why you want it? Are you audacious enough to ask for it? And are you audacious and brave enough to give it to yourself? In that part, also sit down with yourself and be really honest about what is this environment that you need to create in order to be able to give that to yourself, in order to be able to thrive. And the environment is not just physical space, it's also from individuals that you're surrounded with, to conversations that you're participating in, to the inner dialogue that you're having with yourself. It also is the energies that you're susceptible to. All of that needs to be reimagined as well, so that you can set up or redefine or redetermine new boundaries. A lot of times setting the boundaries evoke this feeling of guilt, especially for us women who love to give and who really find it so rewarding when we are there for others, when we give to others, when we make others happy, especially for moms. Mom codes run real deep for me, and saying it, I'm not saying yes to kids all the time, but just being there for them, allowing them to interrupt me for a long time was something like, well, it's my job as a mom to really be flexible. Now, granted, as the kids are getting older, they find it's much easier for them to understand also that, hey, right now it's my time. You may not interrupt me unless it's super emergency, and even then we have definitions of what emergency is and what they perceive as emergency. And even then it's case-to-case basis, but in general, like, this is my time, this is my focus right now, this is my priority right now, because I know that when I take care of that, I replenish my own energies and I put away, so to speak, take care of the things that would otherwise be looming around all day long and would be causing me to be stressed out, and consequently them to pick up on this stressful energy, and they would respond to it by being even more interruptive and destructive and just nagging and whining, and you know the drill if you're a parent. So the same goes for individuals and individuals who are in your life, friendships, partnerships. As cold-hearted as it sounds, there comes a time when it's time to really rethink and reevaluate. If you find yourself in relationships where being in presence and the energy of somebody is draining you, then you have probably outgrown this relationship. And my puppies would agree. Actually, let me see if I can switch the camera. There we go. See, my crazies. Of course, it's a playtime when it's time for the camera here. Let's see the light. Okay, all right. So another level of those conversations can also be like, it doesn't necessarily mean walking away from a relationship, but it can also include you sitting down in the person and being really clear that, hey, you know what, I am fully available to have this conversation without the drama. or without a certain kind of behavior, right? A person who means really, who means a lot to me, tends to stress out when the conversation portrays around finances. And for many years, I would take on this stressful energy, and I would then internalize it, and I would make their story my own, and I would try to take off the load they're carrying and put it on my shoulders, like some kind of a martyr. It was really self-destructive. It wasn't a relationship to be walked away from, but we really started to sit down with the person, and I said to them, listen, I love you, I fully support you, I am here for you, and if you want to have those conversations, we can have them, and we're going to be talking about facts. We're not going to be evolving the emotions, especially when they're just repeating the same old pattern without your willingness to actually do something about it, and you continuously being stuck in the same story, playing a victim of circumstance. It was a little of shock to their system to hear it first, but by me creating that boundary, what that created was a space for them to step into. And surely enough, over time, they noticed the change in themselves, and they notice the change in their own perspectives around the topic. And sooner and later, what used to be triggering for them was no longer triggering, right? So by me creating my own boundaries, ultimately created space for them to deal with what had to be dealt also. So yeah, this is simply one of the byproducts, especially when you cohabitate with others, like in a family unit. It is stressful as always, right? To be wearing so many hats and juggling so many roles, and being consistently the one who adjusts and who is putting everybody else first. But you get to control that, and you get to respond to that differently. And even when you can't necessarily change the environment, you can simply change how you respond. Another example, and I mentioned that in a video earlier, the story that I had with when it comes to financial independence and fierceness and being a strong woman, again, I had to reevaluate, was the narrative that I bought into really serving me? It was for many decades, but it didn't serve me anymore. So I had to reevaluate it, reimagine it, redefine it, and then set the boundaries that I required in order to heal that wound, and in order to implement and embody the new knowing, the new awareness. Again, honesty and deep conversations and daily practice, devotion, and sometimes, yeah, a lot of discomfort. It was required, but it had to happen. So I hope this gives you an inspiration. I hope this gives you a permission, in case you still need one, to really follow this knowing of your own heart, because you already know in your heart what supports you and what doesn't support you. And also, a side note, right? Oftentimes it can happen that when we are in the thick of the things, is that the expression? I guess. We require more space and tighter boundaries. And through time, when we take care of the issues that we are dealing, when we heal, when we achieve what we set out to achieve and accomplish, and as we grow and evolve, it's always the right time to sit back down and take an overview and an inventory and change your mind, right? There's not one rule that says that you cannot change your mind at any given time. You simply follow what feels right for you, because ultimately, even if you think that, oh my gosh, I must have overreacted, I was too rigid, I was too harsh, and I was too strict, that was your truth, and it was still true to you. Now, if that no longer applies, then you just change that. And again, it always comes down to communication, especially in a partnership. My husband and I always talk about it, and I personally never have an issue saying, hey, I'm really sorry. In fact, you know the story when I was telling you about him fully and unconditionally supporting me, and me being completely oblivious and unable to recognize that for quite some time, actually. One of the most profound experiences for us was when we sat down and I turned to him and said, I just want to say thank you and I'm sorry. And he looked at me like a head to head, like, what are you apologizing for? He said, I was just unable to recognize all that you have done for me, and you being here all this time and still showing up, and me just pushing you away. In granted, it was my fight for survival through postpartum depression and burnout, but still he was there in the best way he knew how. And that conversation was funny because he was like, well, isn't it my job as a husband? I was like, no, actually, no. Many people would choose to walk away, and you stayed even when I wanted to walk away. So yeah, just being honest with yourself first, and then with those around you. And the same conversation happened when I actually did choose to release certain individuals from my life for things that were deeply personal. And as time went by, it was time to reevaluate it. And I had to be really honest with myself and have really uncomfortable conversations with myself with, was there ego that was still involved and wanted me to stick it through and see it through? Or if I tapped into the future version of myself, what is in alignment and what is congruent and what is in integrity with this future version of myself that I am becoming and calling in and embodying? And the answer was really clear. It was really clear. Again, it was a whisper in my heart. It was not the shouting out, but it all comes down to, again, being willing to be still enough to listen, and then to trust those nudges. So again, I hope this gives you some tools, and I hope it gives you an inspiration. I hope you don't need a permission, but you just might, and this just might be it for you. Again, if you have any questions, please do let me know. I'll talk to you tomorrow again. Sending you much love, and let's see, any more puppy kisses here? Yeah, there we go. Take care.